Hello, everybody here from Positive Parenting. I am alive, as you can see. I do have a lovely bruise here. Many of you might know that I've had my wisdom teeth removed. So last Thursday I had surgery for all 4 wisdom teeth. It was quite painful and sore, and it still is, but I've got to say, medication. Stay on the pain relief. Pain relief helps. But it's been an interesting weekend, and I just wanted to share some thoughts I had on how to prepare your kids when you have surgery. And it's funny because I did a lot of research before we went in. So we had the really weird situation last week that my husband went in for a day procedure on the Wednesday, and then I went in for my wisdom teeth surgery on the Thursday. So we actually had this situation where both of us went in for day procedures in hospital, which doesn't normally happen, and certainly would never normally try and order things to be that way. But we obviously had to put in place some plans to help our kids through that, since it was the school holidays, and it was quite an anxious sort of time for them, having both parents sort of in hospital. And when I did some research, I found that there's lots of things to support kids when they go into hospital, but not so many resources there to help kids when it's their parents or their carers that are in hospital. So I just wanted to share some things that have helped us over the weekend and over last week, when we had this really unprecedented situation where my husband and I were both in hospital. So the first thing I think, and I'm writing a post on this at the moment as well, is with your kids. So don't lie to your kids, particularly if they're a bit older. Tell them quite honestly what's happening. So we're able to say to our kids that, their father was having a diagnostic procedure in hospital for the day, that obviously I was having my wisdom teeth removed. So we're able to sort of tell them vaguely what the operations entailed. You don't always have to go into, specifics, but I think it really helps to tell your kids as much as possible, particularly if there's going to be a period of recovery following, or if there's going to be changes to you. So I've got bruising and swelling particularly on one side of my face. So that was important, so my kids could understand, this is why mum, is a bit like that now. She's obviously had the surgery. So I think certainly being honest and explaining in an age-appropriate way what's going on, and particularly being clear on if they're routine, like both surgeries or both procedures were routine. So it wasn't sort of we were going in and there was huge changes of anything happening. So explain to the kids going, mum's going in for a routine, procedure, it's going to be okay. And this is what it might involve. And this is sort of what the recovery time might look at. And these are the sorts of things that, that mum may not be able to do afterwards. So I think it's really important to be as honest as possible with your kids when you're going in for a procedure. And the second thing is to have, obviously trusted friends or family to look after them. So in our case, we had to hand the kids over, I think it was the Tuesday afternoon. My husband had to be in Sydney on the Wednesday, and then I was having surgery on the Thursday. And the kids didn't come back to the Friday, so it was 3 nights that they were away from home. So obviously I wanted to make sure that they were with people they trust. So they were with their grandparents, with my husband's parents. And that really helped because it worked out really well for us. It was the school holidays, and they're used to actually going away to their grandparents for a few nights in the school holidays. So it actually worked out really well for us to say, okay, well, your trip away or your nights away with Nan and Pa are going to be on these days, and that just happens to be the days that mum and dad are going and having these procedures done. So for us, it worked really well. And obviously, if you have some leeway, if you have some notice before your procedure, it's you can build that up. You can get friends or family to do that. It's a really good reminder too, though, that anything sort of a medical emergency, etc., could happen at any time. So even if you don't anticipate anything happening, it might be good timing to think, okay, well, if something did happen to me, if I landed in hospital for a period of time, who could help with the kids, or who could I call upon to help with that? So it's not bad to have an idea or spend some time thinking about who, who could look after your kids, who, would you trust to have them, who would have the capacity and the capability to look after them. So it's probably good to have that thought process and to have that thinking now before the time comes, so you can then be in a position to prepare and to give your kids time to get used to that person, to give the person time to get used to the idea, that sort of thing. So in our case, obviously, we have grandparents who were able to take the kids while my husband and I were both having our procedures. But it's always good to think ahead. And if you can't necessarily think of someone straight away, who could help you in that situation, it's probably not a bad idea to start thinking through and going, okay, how, who could I approach? Who could help me in this instance? Because it makes a huge difference if your kids are with people they trust. So that's a huge thing. The third thing I would suggest is to have open communication with your kids, and that is to allow them to ring you or text you, or to have progress in what's going on. Because obviously they will be more likely than likely anxious and wondering, okay, is everything going okay? How are you doing? How's the recovery going? That sort of thing. So it just makes a lot of sense to be as, to be as open as you can with communication. One of the big revelations for us this last sort of fortnight, we gave the older two kids mobile phones for the first time. And it's not something we haven't wanted to do. It's just something that hasn't come up as a need, but it's becoming increasingly necessary. And Gilbert went off and did some guide dogs orientation training for his vision on buses during the holidays. So we got a phone for that. And it worked out really well because the kids had these phones and went over to their grandparents, and they were actually able to text us whenever they wanted to, and also ring to find out what was going on and how we were going. And it was beautiful. It was actually amazing. I got so much more out of them texting and out of them actually initiating this contact than I would have if we had just rung every night to see we're going okay and how we going and how they're going. So I've got to say, from that point of view, it surprised me. It was so good, just being able to sort of to read their thought process through text. And that sort of goes into, with a lot of kids on the spectrum, they find it difficult to express their emotions or to express how they're feeling. Sometimes it's a lot easier to do that through the written word. So Gilbert keeps a diary every night. Matilda does a lot of art and a lot of expression that way. And so we found that when they had their phones and they were able to communicate with us while we were sort of, going through the process of going from hospital to hospital, that they were able to communicate in ways that we hadn't even sort of imagined. It was fantastic. So I loved it. I loved getting these messages from my kids that showed me how much they loved me, but they wouldn't have done that normally sort of by calling or anything. So make sure communication is open. So give your kids the chance. It will lessen their anxiety. It will help them manage sort of their worry. And it just keeps them informed. So even if the kids are younger, and if it's like you agree to ring twice a day, or they can ring you at night, or whatever the case may be, make sure that sort of, if you're in that process of being in hospital or being away from them for a period of time, keep that communication open. The other thing to do if you're, heading into surgery for yourself is to be clear on the recovery time with them. And I mentioned this a bit earlier. So it's really important for them to understand sort of how surgery or how that procedure will affect you. So in my case, I was on pretty heavy-duty painkillers for a few days. So the first time I drove was today. So I had my my procedure on Thursday, and today, Monday, was the first time I'd driven since then, mainly because I've been on these heavy-duty painkillers and there was no way, that I had the capacity to drive. So one of my kids, Delilah, went off to the movies yesterday. I wasn't able to go with her, but at least we're able to, be clear from the outset and say over the weekend I'm going to have a quiet weekend, and if they were invited and if other people could take them places, that was great, but I couldn't actually take them anywhere. So it's really important to be clear on the recovery with your kids so that they understand sort of and can, manage their own expectations of what they'll do and what you can do for them. And that's also the fact that, that also goes, in line with things like, okay, I went to sleep, I rested a fair bit, that I, wasn't going to do the normal reading I'd do at night and things like that just because my mouth was sore, etc. So just little things like that. As with everything, just be careful with expectations. And if, for instance, there's physical limitations that stop you for doing too many things for quite a while, for 2 weeks, a month or so afterwards, be clear on that and put in place some strategies to help your kids through that. And the fifth and final thing is to manage sort of routine, or to try and make things as seamless as possible for your kids. So, for instance, if you are going to be off your feet for quite some time, try and find some ways around that. So try and get people to get your kids to after school activities. Try to institute and maintain a routine to help your kids through this change. So you may not be physically able to do the same things you were, but hopefully you can work around that so your kids can still maintain the activities and the interests and what they need to do to feel sort of less anxious and more safe. This also goes to show, as I explained, it was in the school holidays that my husband and I had the procedures. And we're able to incorporate that by sending them over to their grandparents' house. They normally have time with their grandparents in the holidays. So in our case, we didn't maintain regular routine. We sort of made it, okay, this is, you normally go to your grandparents for, a few days in the holidays. So this is what we're doing now. And while you're at your grandparents, this is what your father and I are doing. We're having to have some procedures in hospital. So just try and make it, I suppose, a little less daunting for your kids. So either build it into a routine or make sure that normalcy can continue. So normal activities can continue. So they've got a frame of reference and they've got something that they can feel more comfortable with. Or if it's something like, as I said, in the school holidays, make it something positive. So, wow, you're going to go and have some time with your grandparents. We're going to be doing this, but you're going to be doing this. And then that way it gives them that distraction. It gives them some help in dealing with their anxiety, and it gives them that encouragement that, there is some normality sort of with things, even though things are obviously very different. So that's what I just wanted to sort of talk a little bit about. So heading to hospital, as I said, last week, my husband and I both had procedures. We had to give the kids to their grandparents for a few nights for these things to happen. So they didn't have to sort of come to the hospital with us. We kept contact with them. They were able to pursue their own interests, to have some holiday time with their grandparents. And we were also able to do the things we needed to do. But I think what's really important, as I said, is when you prepare your children for a hospital visit for yourself, there's heaps of information out there for when kids go to hospital, but not so much for when parents do. And I'm going to work on a post from that. But I think be honest with them, tell them what's going to happen. Be clear, be age specific and age appropriate. But I think it's really important that you're honest. I think it's very important that that they're placed with trusted people to look after them, people that they trust, people they feel comfortable with. I think it's very important that you have open communication. So you let your kids know when, you're going to be back from hospital, how you're doing. You give them an avenue to contact you so they can express, their fears, and they can get in contact with you and help themselves in that way. I think it's also very important to be clear on recovery time with them. You need to manage their expectations. You need to show them and explain to them what's going to happen. If you can't play with them, if you can't drive, if there are certain things you won't be able to do, be clear from the outset so that they are aware and you can prepare them accordingly. And the fifth thing is try to maintain some sort of routine or try to minimise the disruption in some way to that. And that can be difficult, but it might be that they have to stay with someone for a little while longer. It could be that you arrange for others to help continue their normal routine of after-school activities, particularly if you can't drive. And it could be, as I said, in our case, that we were in school holidays, so we actually made it a bit more of a special thing. It was an occasion for them to go to their grandparents. So it was less about our surgery and less about what might be happening to us, and more about the opportunity that they had to spend with their grandparents. So yes, it's not always a good thing to think about, and sometimes we don't have the opportunity to pre-plan when it comes to surgeries, particularly if it's an emergency. But if you can, and if you've got the ability to think about it beforehand, it makes a huge difference, and you'll find that your kids will cope with your hospitalisation sort of a lot easier if you can be honest with them and you prepare them a little bit beforehand. So I hope that helps. I will continue to let you know how I go. As I said, I'm still feeling a bit swollen and sore on the side, but I can speak now, which is great. And I will continue to try and share videos on topics and on things that I experience and feel would be useful for you guys. In the meantime, hope to see you guys soon. I am heading off. There's a carer session tomorrow at Charlestown Leagues Club at 10 o'clock, which I'm going to go to. So I'd love to see anyone there who, you know, who might be watching. Otherwise, yeah, I'll come back with a video hopefully next week when I'm feeling a bit less bruised and sore and icky. But anyway, off to pick up the kids now from school. But thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later. Bye.